I didn't think I'd actually ever say this, but it's definitely too hot to be outside for a gardening video. Currently 38 degrees, which in the UK is unprecedented. That's ridiculous.
Having a social media addiction is common these days. A lot of people don't actually admit it or recognise it, and I was in that camp for quite a long time myself, but I definitely have one. I think it's slightly different to a general smartphone addiction in that I don't think it's feasible for the majority of people in the world to not have a smartphone these days. Sort of like an eating disorder in the sense that it's difficult to entirely abstain. So you've always got that temptation around you and you have to use it at some point, with a smartphone anyway. Social media is starting to be within that camp, especially if you're like me and you do actually earn a little bit through it. But I still think that there are ways to significantly cut down your time on social media, and I'm trying out some of those things. I still think it's possible and desirable to cut down significantly time on social media, and I'm going to tell you about the things that I've been trying to do in order to get my use under control. I'd be being completely dishonest if I made out that it was really easy and that I hadn't experienced any trouble doing it, but I have had some success taking certain steps. For a long time now, I've had it as a habit that I don't take my phone to bed. I'll leave it charging outside of the room, which doubles up as it helps me to get out of bed when my alarm goes off, so that I can't just snooze it like 16 times and then suddenly wonder why I'm up so late and not at the appointment that I was supposed to be at. But why bother with all of this? What are the costs to having a social media addiction? For me, they're quite high, but I think it's important that we caveat that with, when you consider an opportunity cost, i.e. a cost that you don't ever see truly realised, I think we can have a tendency to massively overestimate what we would be able to do with our time if this one thing wasn't in our lives. So you think, oh well, if I quit social media, suddenly become proficient in several languages, as well as learning the piano and writing a book, then perhaps that's an unreasonable set of expectations. But I can tell you, because I didn't use social media very much prior to 2020, I was definitely more organised, and my life has become visibly much more disorganised now that I use it quite a lot. And I can only comment from lived experience, but I'm pretty sure that my attention span has got worse too. Whenever I'm trying to do something that's difficult, I always open up an app just at the point where I would normally have to stop and actually concentrate on something in order to get past that difficult phase of it, and it becomes a really convenient escape to just open an app and become really distracted for a fairly long period of time that I don't really want to admit. But I will, because I think it's important to be honest in these situations, because it helps other people to realise that their own use is not necessarily as bad as they might think it is by keeping it in secret. I've had loads of days where my intentions have been completely scuppered by a massive TikTok binge, and I feel absolutely terrible after doing something like that. The guilt is palpable. Whenever it gets difficult, the app's open, I get to the end of the day and I feel awful, feel drained, and I'd be embarrassed to tell somebody what I'd actually done if they asked me what I'd done with my day. But the other side of it is that I get work through TikTok. I've sold affiliate products through there, and I've sold some of my own products. I'm allowed to plug my own shit, okay, so give me a break. Some of my own courses as a result of the platform. So I do make some money as a result of being on there. Obviously there is the pittance that the TikTok Creator Fund pays out, but genuinely I think I've probably made about 140 quid over a year's worth of daily use of the app. So is it very well paid? No, it's not sustainable in the slightest. From the standpoint of a creator on there, rather than just a general user, I think that we've all become sucked in by the promise that the app gave, which was that you could be discovered, you could get your message out there, and you could have your break far sooner than you might on other platforms like YouTube, where it takes quite a lot of grinding before you ever get anywhere. And now it seems that the thought of fame is enough for people to pour their heart and soul into making content. And the reality of making content, as anybody who's ever tried it has done in earnest, is that it's actually quite difficult. There is a fair bit of work that is involved behind the scenes, trying to make it work and trying to make it fit into your life is actually quite a challenge. I'm not trying to be one of those influencers whinging about how hard it is, I don't make very much money from it at all. So I do quite a lot of the work and I don't get rewarded anywhere near commensurate with the amount of time that I put in. I do it largely just for pleasure. Well, that's what I have to say, so that I don't feel like I've wasted all of that time. But it's not just that it does that, it's not just that promise, it's that it actively suppresses any of your videos where you try and send people off platform. So if you try and say link in bio, those words will be enough to get your video views suppressed. And the power of the platform, I'm not trying to deny it, is that I have a video per week as a small creator on there. It will exceed in watch time the number of hours that I've ever lived in my life. And any attempts at control of usage of the app generally fail. If you just try and reduce your watch time, I've tried to put app limits on and I just ignore the app limits and override them. If there are those costs associated, what can you actually do about it? Not a question that I've got fully answered, but this is what I've done that has actually helped. And on those days where I've procrastinated, is it always just TikTok that's caused me to do that? No, I had a pretty strong procrastination habit from years ago. I've been doing it for a long time, I know what I'm doing. But it has caused that low-level distraction that means that as soon as something gets difficult, you're on there. The only thing that's ever worked is either distancing myself from my phone for a certain period of time when I need to get something done, so that I would have to go downstairs to go and get it, or walk to the other side of the room. That's been helpful, and I have been able to achieve certain things during that time. But what I've done recently is I've deleted the apps from my phone, which I have done before, and my screen time goes down drastically, like really drastically. I could show you the figures, but it's quite embarrassing how much I was using my phone before. So it went from 10 hours screen time a day, sometimes that would be a bad day. Now it's down to about 3, and some of that's on WhatsApp, texting, sending invoices for work. So I think that that's a reasonable amount, probably above most people's average. I don't know, it doesn't really matter what the average is. That's a point at which I think is quite healthy, for me anyway. But because of the opportunities it does give, it means that I would still have to periodically log in. So I can't just completely eliminate it from my life in the way that I think is probably advisable for people who aren't making stuff on there, if they don't get enough out of it to justify all of their time investment in those apps. The other thing is that I want to make more content on YouTube. I enjoy making the videos on here, and after I've finished editing something or producing something, I actually feel good. I don't have that feeling of emptiness. I feel like I've invested my time rather than having just spent it. You see, once people are able to make a significant platform on here, they're able to make money in ways that other platforms just don't offer. And you can spend longer on each piece, which means that it's bizarrely easier to fit into a normal life rather than something that requires you to log in every single day and do an incessant amount of work over a long period of time in order to get anywhere with it. So seeing as I enjoy making stuff on YouTube, I'm planning to spend longer making stuff here. I suppose I could boycott TikTok, but I don't think they're really going to give two shits about whether I'm on there or not. But it might encourage other people to do something similar. I think that there should be some creator-based boycott of the app until they agree to actually share fairly the profits that they make. Look at some of the creators who are on there. Some big accounts have absolutely tiny accounts elsewhere where they're trying to send people off platform so that they can actually build a sustainable income from all of the work that they do online. And how can that be when all of these other apps are attempting to copy TikTok with the content that they're trying to push? They're all trying to push this short form content. But in order to share your TikTok content on those other apps, they don't want a TikTok watermark, and they want you to make your own native content in those apps, which I don't know who has time when you're not being paid to make all of these different native forms of content and doing all the stuff that's required in order to repurpose it for other apps. Repurposing still takes time, and as much as people might come up with these sexy automations that they try and say that they use on Zapier, bullshit. It still takes time and it takes skills to set those things up, and we shouldn't be expected to just do that labour for free, seeing as other apps are trying to muscle in on what TikTok has. in terms of the attention and the exploitation of its creator. When I deleted the apps last week, I did it in conjunction with some time off my usual work because I wanted to get some of my bedroom sorted that I've just been putting off for a long time because I haven't had time to spend making the fitted wardrobes in there. And it's a task that I would find quite difficult because it's not something that I've done before. This would have been the prime time that I would have been scrolling like mad. So I know that that is one tangible outcome, and I could extrapolate that to imagine what I am able to achieve in a normal week if I were to put my mind to things in a way that I was able to prior to having TikTok installed on my phone. Instagram, I spend a reasonable amount of time in direct messages talking to people, but I find the content quite boring these days. So that sort of improved focus over the space of a year or 5 years is a massive amount, and it's not something that I think I'm willing to give up yet. And prior to 2020, when I wasn't really on social media, I don't want to view this through those bullshit nostalgia soaked rose tinted glasses where I imagined that I had some perfect life before. That's not the case, but I was definitely more organised, and if I put my mind to something, then I would generally be able to push through the difficult stages and achieve what I'd put my mind to, or get something useful out of it anyway. My ability to do that hadn't become zero as a result of being on TikTok, but I can feel that it's diminished, and my willpower to push through on things is definitely lower. When I first moved into the house, I was doing a lot of work on it. Then I had a huge hiatus, which was partly because I got burnt out just doing so much work as well as doing work on the house, but also because that was the point at which I started to get a social media addiction, and I know that it severely interrupts my focus. So for now, I'm still intending to just leave them deleted on my phone, and when I have a burning desire to open them and share something, then I can install it for a quarter of an hour, half an hour, whatever it takes, in order to just share it and leave, because I don't think it's worth having that low-level distraction in my life anymore. Don't actually know how you can take control of your usage of it without having them uninstalled on your phone. If you have any ideas, then share them in the comments below. I'd be interested to hear about it. Losing my script here. I think that more people should actually start boycotting the apps, because we don't have any other currency against them other than to refuse to make the content that they desperately require. Is everybody going to be doing that? Or will there be people that consider that now, if people started boycotting it, that they would use that as their opportunity to make their break? Yeah, they probably would, but I think that the app creators would actually give a shit about that. If they're going to refuse to allow people to be sent off platform, like if you say that there's a link in your bio and they suppress that, that's not going to be sustainable. So they're refusing to pay you on one hand, while also luring you in with this fake opportunity. But think about the model that YouTube has. They share a considerable amount more money with the creators through their advertising. It's 50%. But also you can include tons of links in the description, and they're not going to suppress that at all. Instagram, again, they don't care, so long as there's a few people on there who pretend to be making tons of money and espouse a nonsensical lifestyle that they don't actually live, or perhaps they only live as a result of espousing the lifestyle, and it's kind of this weird Inception level cycle where they say, because they say that they're rich. I know that people do that on YouTube too, with all that motivation productivity porn where they say that they're a property investor, but they're actually just making money through saying they're a property investor. Anyway, I don't have the answers, but I can tell you one of the things that I noticed when I did abstain is that I did get withdrawal. I can remember 2 nights waking up in the middle of the night actually feeling anxious in a way that you would expect if you came off a drug cold turkey. It does behave in the same way as other addictions. So I've still had the apps deleted, and I think that's the only way that I'm going to be able to contribute to saying what you should do. It's as simple as that. I know it's a fairly long self-indulgent video to tell you to just get to that stage, but it probably takes quite a lot for you to be convinced that deleting them periodically is actually a good idea. The other trap that I've definitely fallen into is a fairly well documented cognitive dissonance, which is that people think that keeping all options open is always a good idea, and often it's not. So I'd much rather
keep concentrating on YouTube, and just if the others have to fall by the wayside, then that's fine. And I have to accept those consequences, because keeping those doors open is in effect closing down the door that is open at YouTube, which I think is a more sustainable option. So the one takeaway from this video is just, if you have to and you're struggling to limit your use, then just delete them. Don't have them on your phone unless you want something specific from them and you need to go on.